So, James, thanks very much for finding time to talk to us today. Good
Oh,
to
thanks
talk to you.
for having us. No, it's great. Good to see you guys.
I can't compete with that hat. I mean, Tony, by the way, has got a black woolen one which has headphones in the side, which when he goes
Oh
to,
wow.
when he goes for a
No,
walk, he can use. But
I've
it's not
got
as
an
funky
array
as
of hats.
yours.
I
Hats is
got
sort of like my go-to. When I can't be asked to do my hair, then out comes one of my many hats. This is a favorite at the moment because I'm doing a lot of interviews because I'm promoting the book and stuff. So I'm doing a lot
Yeah,
of Zoom interviews and stuff like that. So I'm seeing in this hat way more often lately than the normal suit.
that's it's a good look. I want to take you back before. I mean, obviously we are going to talk about the book, and I've skim read it, right? I've skim read it, but it's quite a long read, and I can see when I read it properly, I'm going to really enjoy it actually straight away. But I want to take you back to the early days. Firstly, if you can, tell me about you growing up, right? And your first guitar, those kind of really early days.
Yeah, well, I started playing guitar when I was 9, so we moved about a bit when I was a kid. And so I was born in Cardiff, raised in Barry till I was like 8, and then we moved to a place called Little Mill, which is halfway between Pontypool and Usk, and it's right in the middle of nowhere. It didn't even have a shop, post office, nothing. It had a pub, and that was it. So it was really rural, from going from living in the city centre of Barry, with tarmac and roads outside your house to literally nothing but fields. And my first birthday there, I got given an acoustic guitar, a little Spanish one, like they get in schools. And I didn't have any interest in playing guitar. I don't know where my dad got the idea from, but it turned out it was actually stolen. He'd nicked it from somewhere because it was like another kid's birthday. He had no ideas and no money, and he saw it somewhere and just thought, right, there we go. That's that problem taken care of. So
Yeah.
I had a stolen guitar, and he knew how to play one riff, which was like a little blues riff with 2 fingers. And he showed me how to play that, and I just fell in love with it straight away. I was hooked. I picked it up really quick, and that just became my obsession then, through next few years. I taught myself how to play. And that little Spanish guitar, was where it all started.
You would have been what, 9 or 10 then? Would you?
9 then, yeah. It was my
Yeah.
9th birthday.
Yeah, cool. I did the same thing for my daughter, but unfortunately, well, I tried on both my daughters to indoctrinate them into music, but neither of them were having it.
Right.
Is it a place called Goitra? Is that right? Is that where
Yeah,
you
I
were?
went to
Yeah.
country school. Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
next village across from Little Mill.
Okay, so I've kind of vaguely heard of it, but I don't think I've ever been in the area. Did I miss much?
Not really, no. You could look out of your window in any kind of like rural town anywhere and kind of get the vibe.
Yeah,
Like
you've seen one
cowboys.
car, you've seen them all, I suppose.
Pretty much, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I like my partner loves going out for like a stroll up the mountain on a a kind of spring morning. But I don't see the point because for me, when I grew up, as a kid, walking through the mountains was like what I had to do every single day to do anything. If I wanted to see my friends, I had to walk 3 miles through the fields. So I'm not one of these people that has this kind of thing for the outdoors. It's like, nah,
yeah, I
see
get
that.
that. Yeah, I wanted to talk to you because you said about I did, like I say, I bought my daughter a little kind of 3/4 size classical guitar, I think it was, and she learned a couple of tunes, but she's never played it since. But I reading through the book, the first time I think it was a Strat. Was it, I think you had a Strat moment, didn't you?
Yeah, that was my first proper guitar. So I had a little kind of like electric before that. I'm not sure what it was, some kind of like copy maker, whatever. And then by the time I was like a teenager, I could properly play. I learned from watching videos, VHS things of like, all the proper guys. And I would kind of teach myself all this stuff. And I just because it was the only thing I did. I was obsessed with it. It was my world. So by the time I was a teenager, I was pretty good. So my dad, bless him, kind of splashed out and bought me my first proper electric guitar, which was a black American Strat with a whammy bar and everything. And it was like, I was proper into all that stuff at the time, Steve Vai and all the gizmos and the dive bombs and stuff. So having that kind of beast was like just opened up a whole new world for me. So yeah, that guitar, like I just every day, like my parents knew when I got out of bed in the morning because they'd hear the amp go on. I had this little kind of like hi-fi amp thing,
Mm.
and then as soon as I come back from school, I just go straight upstairs. They'd hear the amp go on again, and that was it. So as soon as I got that Strat, it was like game on.
Sounds like a idyllic childhood to me. You and your Strat.
My parents were awesome, man. Like I was raised on a diet of like Pink Floyd and Frank Zappa and
Mm.
Stevie Ray Vaughan and all the good stuff. So those were the sort of records that I learned to play from listening to. So when I went to college, then when I was like 16 or whatever, I didn't know any scales. I could improvise all across the neck, and I could play all the proper, technical stuff, but I didn't know, what a mode was or anything. So I learned all that stuff afterwards, which I think was, for me, I feel was the right way around to do it, because I didn't like get bogged down with the theory and
Yeah.
stuff. But it came in really useful after the event to kind of to know what I was doing and why that worked and things.
I think that's where a lot of teaching with kids goes wrong, to be honest with you. Where they come at you with the theory and you hate it so much, you never get a love for the instrument. So I think it's,
Yeah.
it is right to go the other way. What's your, I think in your case, I think it relates probably to blues actually, but what's your earliest music memory, would you say, if you had to pick one?
It is music. Well, I always loved music as a kid. Like, I used to make my own albums out of cassette tapes. So, like, I was, like all kids of my generation, a massive Michael Jackson fan and stuff. And I would listen to the radio, and every time one of his songs came on, I would record it onto my little cassette, and I eventually managed to get the whole album like in order, which I kind of nicked from the radio. And then I kind of sing along and dance to it and stuff like that. So, like all the pop hits, was kind of like my first musical memory, and I would perform in front of the family and learn the dance moves and stuff. So I was always like really into it. But I think that's quite common for kids of that age.
Yeah.
But in terms of playing music, it was definitely that moment when I got my first guitar and I played that first riff, and I was like, oh my god, I it wasn't even like a thought. It was more of just a kind of awakening.
I think in the book you write it as do 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 do, but I wonder what the tune was.
Oh well, it was the blues, so it was
Yeah.
the old classic do 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 do.
There you go. Makes sense now. Great. Tony wants to talk to you because he's got a kind of a connection with you from his family, with a kind of something which you was quite interested in, something an aspect of you, James.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just something that I'm passionate about. Really, it's just because of my father. Really, my father had really high hearing loss. And what I wanted to discuss about it, I've always been quite sort of careful in my ears and stuff, but I've ended up having some tinnitus and stuff through being in music for a long time and stuff. And of course, there's great people like Brian Wilson who have composed, who have had hearing issues and things like that. Just wanted to talk to you about your feelings about it. I mean, I think it's something that's not discussed enough, really. It's like one of those things that's quite hidden, and if has it been really a hindrance, or how have you managed with that as well, with some of the hearing loss you had?
Well, I got diagnosed with a thing called bilateral cholesteatoma when I was 10. So it was kind of sad that, like, a year after I discovered this kind of passion for music and my first guitar, that I got landed with this diagnosis that was quite severe. If it was left untreated, my options were basically deafness, brain damage, or worse.
Wow.
So it was pretty advanced by that point. It's like a tumor basically that grows inside the middle ear.
Mm-hmm.
And like all tumors, it just grows and grows and grows. And mine was pretty advanced by the point that it was diagnosed. I have one in each side, which is really rare. So within the space of 2 operations, it turned out to be 3 operations, I'd lost pretty much half my hearing in both ears, and I had constant tinnitus in this side, my left side, which is there all the time. It's there now. It's like a constant hissing white noise sound, which is loud. So it's quite a dramatic change, in a short space of time. But I don't remember it being a problem as a kid, because by the time I dealt with all that, I was literally going straight into high school. So it was quite a formative time, in my life anyway, to be sort of 11, 12, starting high school, and to have just come out of having quite major surgery. So I think I was just more interested at that point in, being a kid again, joining school, cracking on. And I don't remember it being a problem, but I think in hindsight, it definitely was. It affected my education because I was in and out of hospital all the time. But also, I don't think I was aware of how much it affected my hearing. I did miss a lot. I did terrible in school. I failed at pretty much everything. I think if it wasn't for the fact that I was into rock and roll, I think it would have affected me more, because it turned out that the thing that I loved to do for my recreation was loud, and I could turn it up. you know, and it didn't matter. But I think if I didn't have that and I was into something that was a bit more social, perhaps I think I would have noticed it more, you know. So in many ways, yeah, rock and roll was kind of helped me sail through that without too much of a problem.
That's really interesting, because you would have thought that music, it would have been a problem with music, but it turned out that music was just kind of saving grace with it, wasn't it?
It was,
Because
yeah.
because you're right, it's a conversational things, you know. I mean, I still struggle enough. It's a really loud room, or if you're in a pub, remember those things called pubs? Well, if you're in there and there's a conversation going on, and I end up sort of going, yeah, and nodding because I'm not picking up on the conversation, you know. So
Yeah.
that's a great answer. It really, it's interesting how music was kind of your savior on that. That's
Yeah,
brilliant.
totally. Yeah. Well, I go through that in the book. It's like I didn't really realize how bad my hearing was until I was about 26, because my first job was in a recording studio as a producer and a teacher and stuff. And again, loud environment. Everybody there is half deaf, you know, from too many gigs and stuff. So, you know, I was probably on equal ground with a lot of the people that I was working with. And again, it's loud. You know, you're cranking it up all day long. It was only when the studio closed down and I got my first real world job, which was working in an office doing accounts, that I realized just how bad it was. And I actually had to quit the job after 6 months because I was cringing going there. I couldn't hear anything, and people were taking the mick out of me and stuff. And I think it was until 26 I realized I actually had a problem. But until that point, yeah, it was plain sailing.
Yeah, I mean, on a serious note, I still think it's one of those things that people do joke about, you know, and yet it can really hold you back, your confidence, and you know, definitely so. And that's why I think the more people talk about it and understand that it can be a real problem, not just with the fact of not being able to hear, but how it affects your confidence and your abilities, you know.
Well, one of the things I mentioned in the book is, again, something I've only learned in hindsight, is that it's the extra computing power that it demands of your brain. Because when I'm talking to somebody, I instinctively kind of watch their lips.
Yeah.
I've never been taught to read, but I've been doing it, for so long. I just do it instinctively, and I'm processing that at the same time that I'm hearing half of what you're saying. There's a lot of gaps in what I'm hearing.
Sure.
So I'm picking up some visual, some audible, and I'm processing it all for the nearest match all the time. So you kind of, there's three things going on in your brain all the time. You're not just having a conversation like normal people, and it's quite draining. And I think that's why as a kid I found school and certain social things difficult, was because it was just tiring, So it was easier for me to be by myself, with the headphones on, the guitar cranked up. So I think it's difficult for me to look back and see where the line was with that, whether it was all passion or whether it was some escapism as well. But I think probably a mixture of the two.
So interestingly, the book title, Noise Damage, is that a double meaning, or?
Well, it's not actually. Yeah, my hearing is not something I think about that much. I think noise damage was sort of like life damage.
Yes. Yeah, it says my life was a rock and roll underdog. I mean, it's interesting reading your story, because I did a gig with you once at Nostar with a band, and I was kind of blown away by the fact you had people coming to see you from all over the country. So
we had somebody there from Texas,
amazing,
from France, Essex, Glasgow,
and you just, I think you just come off a tour, and so this was your kind of homecoming kind of gig, but people came from all over the place. So for an underdog, you're quite a well-known underdog, may I say, as an observation.
I feel like I'm the king of the underdogs.
Yeah, I'd go with that. Like I said, I've skim read it. It's 237 pages or something like that, I think it is. So I kind of skim read it, but I can immediately see it's the kind of book I'm going to love reading. Talking about the studio, I think that's where you first recorded Made in China. Is that right, James? Right. Which was like your demo album, if you like. Tell me a little bit about that.
That skim read, you picked up quite a lot in that skim read, I must say. That was, I did my first album there because I had access to the place 24/7, and I couldn't find a band for love nor money. All I wanted to do was be a guitar player in a kick-ass rock and roll band, but I just couldn't find any anyway. I had access to the studio, and I just thought I'll just do my own album, and then maybe I can get a band when I've got some songs down, and it turned into an album, and I played all the instruments and did all the, produced it into a fully formed album. And it kind of took off. Radio 1 played it, and I got calls from Sony and EMI and, all these like big major labels were on the phone, and I was going back and forth to London as double page spreads in the local newspapers, and it kind of just took off really quick. And that's kind of where it all started, really. And that's what made me think, because I had no agenda with it. All I wanted to do was just get a band. I just thought I was making a record that would sort of get the ball rolling. And before I knew it, it took off. So for me, I thought, right, these opportunities don't come along very often. I've had a good bit of beginner's luck. So I thought I should capitalize on it and really go for it, And that's what started the rest of the saga of the book off.
Yeah. Because I mean, how did you manage? Well, obviously the quality must have been good to get that response, but was this in those days, were you sending off cassettes to labels? How were you marketing it to begin with?
It was just CDRs. I did it initially as just to get it, because I'd lived with the album for about 2 years. It took me 2 years to put it together because I'd never written songs before that. I'd never sung before that. Like I say, for me, it was just all about the guitar. So I only sang on it because I couldn't find somebody else to sing on it. I only wrote the lyrics because, I didn't have anyone to do that. So little by little, I ended up kind of doing everything just to finish the thing off. And then, I just basically, just to get some distance on it and some closure so that I could stop, polishing it, I sent some CDs, just burned some CDRs off to like local press just to sort of get a bit of feedback on it. And it just went crazy. I had, the phone calls and double page spreads and magazines, reviews and radio play. And Hugh Stevens, was booking us gigs, from Radio 1. And I was at the top of the unsigned chart on the Radio 1 website for 6 weeks. And, crazy. It just took off snowballed by itself.
Yeah, it's obviously that was a big breakthrough for you. I suppose it was, in a way, it was convenient that you had a studio, but you still had to do everything. You played all the drum tracks and everything then, did you?
Well, the drums were done electronically, yeah. So that's something I learned how to do, which is stuck with me until present day. I did an album last year, and I'm still doing that now. Yeah.
Okay. And there's an art to that as well. It shouldn't be discounted. It's still got to get it right.
Yeah.
And did that lead then? Well, actually, let's talk about another thing while you're talking about that. Let's talk about drummers. See, you say the word drummers, everyone smiles. What's that about with drummers?
Story, yeah.
What's it about? Do you want to say anything about your drummers?
If I could start up my time again, I would love to play the drums. It's the coolest instrument. I'm always air drumming and things like I just can't do it. But I would love to be a drummer. But they're always the craziest one in the band. And
aren't they?
I've got my fair share of drummer stories, as I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah. I mean, my current drummer, I don't know whether you saw us on that. I'm not sure whether you were around. He's a great drummer. He's one of the best drummers I've ever played with. Should I say this?
Yeah.
I'll be mild about it. He's not known for having a dashing personality, shall we say?
Well, none of them. They never are.
He's just, I don't know. He just doesn't seem to kind of express himself with any kind of. Very rarely, see any joy out of him. He just packs his drums away and goes away again.
Unless he's playing drums, in which case he's in his zone.
He might occasionally smile then, maybe. They're a breed of their own, aren't they?
Yeah.
But
completely.
How did that turn into Kaishira then? That sort of came out organically, I suppose, but you had to get a band together, and that's from there, yeah.
Well, yeah. I when I started getting calls from labels, and I was going back and forth to London and going to boardrooms and things like that, it was quite obvious to me that like I'm gonna miss this opportunity if I don't get a damn band together. So I really had to up the ante and crack on. So it was kind of a put together band, really. I put adverts out and stuff and audition people, and it was very difficult to get a band together because the music was really complex. I was a big Frank Zappa fan, so there was like loads of time changes and loads of like self-indulgent layering, the sort of stuff you'd expect when it's made by one guy who's got the keys to a studio.
Yeah
just making his own record, it had everything on there. So it was quite hard to put a band together for that stuff. So it took a while, but we managed to hobble together a band, and that was the birth of Kaishira. It was like I just literally made up the name because it was the project until that point was called Kennedy, just because I couldn't think of anything else. And then I got an email from Nigel Kennedy's solicitor saying, change the name or we're going to consider you passing yourself off as our client. So I was like, okay, well, that's random. But, I wanted a band name anyway. So I thought, well, if I just invent some crazy name, and when you make heavy music, you can have a crazy name, like Sepultura or Pantera or something like that. So I went for a kind of like metal sounding name, and yeah, that was where it started.
So the KY came from the name, did it?
Yeah.
Where's the Shira come from?
I think I was going to make a kind of innuendo then, but I'll keep it family friendly.
Okay,
But,
okay. Leave that to imagination then, is it?
I think what I did, if I kind of just drew up a pile of different variations, and it was amazing how many names were taken. You know, if it's not a band, it'll be some kind of Korean,
Yeah,
bank or something like that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It was like everything was gone. So I was googling things, and then Kaishira didn't exist, and I was like, okay, that kind of sounds cool. It looks kind of cool. Let's just go with that.
Yeah, fair enough. Good reason as any. And then, of course, the deal was kind of pretty well waiting for you based on the songs, and then you had the band, and then you just signed the deal, and the journey began. Is that about right?
Well, I didn't go as far as signing the deal because in the time that it took me to get the band together, which was about a year, and to get stage ready, the industry crashed. So it was right around
Oh
that time.
yeah, yeah.
I came into it right at the end of the old industry and right at the start of the 10-year kind of no man's land. So by the time we got the band together, which, like I say, was like within a year, all the people at those labels had been fired, like all the small independent labels were struggling. And, it had really hit fast, like the Napster thing had happened. And then suddenly, the old way of doing stuff was starting to fall through the floor pretty quick. So we got caught up in that. And we didn't realize because we were so gung ho, ready to go after all the waiting, of trying to get the band together and trying to crack on. We didn't realize we were just, playing in London every night and, sending out invites to labels and doing showcases and doing all the things that we thought we were supposed to do because that's the way it used to be, sending demos out and doing flyers.
Yeah.
And pretty much, overnight, all that stuff kind of died. That just wasn't the way it was done anymore. But the new model of like streaming and, social media and all that sort of stuff hadn't come about either. So there was no new model to replace it. There was like,
well, of course, it was MySpace, wasn't it? You used, wasn't it?
MySpace, yeah, exactly, yeah. I'm not even sure if that must have been around. I think at that time,
yeah, probably quite big then. I think.
Say that again.
I think it was probably quite big then, wasn't it? It kind of came and went, didn't it?
We were on MySpace when the band was active. I'm not sure what year that came about. I'm not sure if it was there right in the early days when the band started, but it was that sort of time. Yeah, like the new model, social media and stuff like that hadn't really become a thing yet, apart from MySpace, and streaming and doing things yourself and making your records in your bedroom and stuff. That hadn't really formulated yet. In the mainstream. So there was kind of like, I feel like there was this 10-year gap where the old school was kind of dying or fighting death, and the new model was kind of figuring itself out. And we just arrived at that changeover point. So for a few years, easily for about 5 years, we were just banging our heads against brick walls, doing gigs and contacting all the labels that loved me a year ago, and now I couldn't. Now the phone number had changed. It was strange.
I think you mentioned as well doing those kind of. I'm pretty sure you did doing those kind of midweek. Showcase gigs where you go up to London, you think it's going to be really cool, and then you end up playing to like one man and his dog who don't get 5 pence, and off you go in your van again.
Yeah. And we just kept on doing it because we thought, well, this is strange. I was like the golden boy, last week. What's going on? Where's the interest gone? And I didn't really get the memo, until way too long. I bashed my head against it, for 5 years and just went at it. Because it had taken me so long to get to that point where I finally had a record, had a band, I knew the interest was there. So I felt like I owed it to myself to really go for it. I was still in my 20s, I was young, so I thought, well, let's really go for this. But I suppose hindsight is a beautiful thing. Like looking back now, I can see that I was caught up in the death of the music industry effectively. And so were all my peers,
Yeah, certainly a big change, wasn't it?
Well, CNN did an article on it, and they called it "Music's Lost Decade." So I feel like that 10 years there was like me and all my friends, great bands who've written great songs, who've all broken up now. I'm still plowing on, but I feel like the new model is fully established now. We can see what it is. We know what it is. We know what the tools are. We know what the rules are. But there was that changeover bit where that wasn't a thing,
So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, I put it on my list as music industry shenanigans. because you had quite an insight into the music industry and all that it could be, didn't you? That's quite a big question, for you, because you kind of go into some detail in the book. But what was the kind of learning curve about, the magic of getting a deal and being sort of what you would consider a successful touring band, etc. In terms of what the industry, how it works, and how it's kind of spun you in and out, sort of thing.
Luck, I think. It sounds like sour grapes to say that the key to success is luck, especially coming from somebody that hasn't had any. But I really feel that because I've been around just long enough now to see so many great bands who've got great songs. They got the full package. They're working hard. They're doing all the things that the rule book says you're supposed to do, and they just cannot catch a break. And I've seen other people get signed a major deal without one song under their belt, and get £1 million, advance to make a record and stuff like that. And I think I've just been around so long that I've seen this happen so many times that for me, I do put it exclusively down to luck. You could be a great band, a nice guy, work really hard, make all the sacrifices and do all the right things. It doesn't mean that you're going to get successful.
So a bigger question than that, which I'll ask you, James, because of who you are and what we've written about, is it even worth forming a new band these days and creating music? Is it even worth having any kind of belief in, getting there?
I think it's better now than it's ever been. I know that it's kind of fashionable to criticize, streaming and social media and stuff like that. But I think people forget that back in the good old days, if you couldn't get a record deal, it was over. You couldn't make a record in your bedroom and put it out for the whole world to listen to. You couldn't do it. Like studios were expensive. They had big, massive mixing desks with, racks of outboard stuff. Like if you couldn't afford to if you couldn't get a record deal, affording to do it yourself just was not an option. And even if you did make a record for yourself, what are you going to do with it? You got a big chunky master disc in your hand. So what? So I think it's much better now. You've got much more hope now. It's harder in many ways because you're competing with everyone else in the world who's also on Facebook and Instagram. So the question now is, how do you get heard above the noise? It's just a different problem, but at least you've got a shot now, whereas before you didn't have a chance. If you couldn't get signed, game over. So I prefer it now. For me, I've done 7 albums. I don't have a day job. I haven't had one in a very long time. I've made all the money I've made in the past 20 years through music, and that may involve, playing some pub covers. It may involve teaching a bit of guitar, but it's also involved, making a few $100 a month from Spotify and selling some merch and, doing your own tours and things.
Well, talking about Spotify, there was an article, I don't know how apocryphal this is, but it was Gary Newman. I think you might have seen this recently.
Sure,
and he was talking about the number of streams and coming out with 37 quid,
Yeah.
So, I mean, what you've had millions of streams. Yeah. So, I mean, I can't really ask you, has it been rewarding, shall I say?
Completely.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm one of the rare people that makes money off Spotify. Every month I get a few £100 from Spotify. So during this pandemic, that's saved my ass because, with Spotify has covered my bills basically, throughout the whole pandemic. I saw the Gary Newman thing, and I think people misplace the blame a little bit. Like, I'm not saying that Spotify are some angels. They're not. They pay next to nothing for a stream, and that the value of music is something that definitely needs to be reassessed, across the board, not just Spotify. But I think the problem with people like the Gary Newman story and like Radiohead, who constantly moan about it, it's not the streaming rate, because these guys are getting gazillions of plays. The problem is their record deal. They get it, for every pound they get, the record company's getting 80% of it. Then they're splitting the other 20% between the 5 members of the band, and each of their managers is taking 20% of that. So when all the middlemen have had the lion's share, the artist is left with nothing. So even a band like Radiohead, who's getting millions and millions of plays every day, they're probably not making much, but that's not Spotify's fault. That's because they signed a record deal back in the good old days when ripping the artist off was the business model. So for somebody like myself, I make 100% of everything. I am the label, so I get the label share. I'm the music publisher, I get that share. I produced it, I performed on it, and I wrote everything. So, I don't get the plays that they're getting, but I get 100% of what I do get paid to me. And a few $100 a month for doing nothing is all right.
So a couple of quick ones for you. How many gigs roughly do you think you did as Kai Shearer when you were touring around? Are we talking thousands or
hundreds and hundreds? Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
if I would hate to say really. If it was more than 1,000, possibly. I mean, we went really hard at it,
Yeah.
for about 10 years.
And you played all around the world pretty well, didn't you?
We got to North America. We did all of Europe and stuff like that. We did the UK several times. So yeah, we did some fair mileage.
So just to ask you an immediate one off the back of that, which is close to Tony's heart, which is one of the reasons why the site exists, with Europe, playing and touring Europe, it's not looking very promising right now, is it?
No, it's not, man. That whole Brexit thing is just oh God, I don't want to get started on that, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's not looking good. I mean, the music industry isn't looking good at the moment for a lot of reasons. Obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic now, and the live industry was kind of on its ass anyway. I think when we come out of the pandemic, I think we're all going to blame the pandemic for the dire state of the the independent venue scene. But it was already bad anyway. I mean, music, small venues were getting closed down left, right, and center anyway before the pandemic. This is kind of just getting the boot in. So just domestically speaking, it's going to be a strange one to see how the other side of this looks. But yeah, I mean, now with the added problems as well of for bands who are at a level where they want to get out and play Europe, with the Brexit thing and the visas and stuff, yeah, it's going to be tough, man. It's going to be tough.
We were talking about it yesterday, and we're just saying, imagine that, the practicalities. I mean, even if it's something like the Balkans or whatever, I don't know, half a dozen different countries. By the time you went over the border every time, you might as well give up,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how it's going to pan out. I really don't. And even domestically speaking, the worry is, I think, is that the only bands who are going to be able to afford to tour, because touring is expensive, are going to be those like major label bands who've got the budget, and what's that going to do for music fans and for the scene in general?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a really pivotal point, is that for up and coming talent, yeah, I mean, yes, they can all do it themselves, but like you said earlier, which again I totally agree with, so can everyone else. So it's kind of tough,
Yeah, and touring is one of those things as well that it kind of goes against what I said, because yes, you can make an album on your laptop in your bedroom for free, but you can't drive a van around the country for free. A van costs money, it costs petrol, you need food. If there's 5 of you going, and a mate doing merch, you've all got, you've got to sleep somewhere and stuff, and it's like touring is expensive. So if we don't have the small venues there to accommodate bands at that level, then it's not going to be an option.
No, I think it's going to rely on a lot of goodwill, actually, and hospitality moving forward is one thing that we think, I hope people will pull together. You make a couple of good allusions to van life, one of them was where you I love that. I think it's a conversation you had with another member of the band, and you said, "Oh, I can't remember getting home last night," and you realized you didn't. You were still in the van. Was
Well,
one.
Well, we were in a flat, but we'd driven so drunk. Basically, we don't remember walking home because we didn't drove. I looked at the window and saw the vehicles kind of skew off across the road, and it was one of my more shameful moments, because I don't obviously encourage drink driving at all. But I did actually sort of get my wrist firmly slapped for that, like a couple of weeks later after a gig by a copper coming out of another venue.
Exactly.
Just fair dues, but yeah, we did a lot of stupid stuff, as you do when you got a bunch of boys together, like adrenaline up and testosterone up, after a gig, you do some stupid stuff.
And the other thing you said was, I picked up on the fact you said the best way to get to the next venue is to head for the next venue as soon as you come off stage in the current venue, save yourself a few hours and have a kip on the way, sort of thing. But it can't do much for your kind of health, I suppose, that kind of stuff.
No, doing it at the level that we did is probably the worst way to do it. But for us, we couldn't afford to do it any other way. It's like we couldn't take a driver with us or anything, because then it's another mouth to feed. So we were a 3-piece band. 3 of us could sleep in a transit van along with the equipment. So I used to sleep in the cabin across the drivers and the passenger seat because I'm the shortest one.
With the
So
gear stick.
with the gear stick in my back.
Yeah.
And I used to gaffer tape like towels and t-shirts over the windows like a curtain, and the other 2 boys would sleep in the back. And so that kind of worked. But if we took anybody else with us, where were they going to sleep? So we kind of had to do it all ourselves. We couldn't afford hotels every single night of the week.
No.
So we had to do all of our own driving, sleep and live in the van basically. And for that reason, once you've done a show, and you still got that kind of adrenaline high for a bit, but then there's that sharp crash. So what we used to do was take off immediately to the next gig, which was normally about 10 hours away or something. Try and get a few hours under our belt whilst we were still buzzing, and then just pull up in the nearest service station once we started flagging, and just sleep in the car park.
Wow. I mean, the funny thing is, I think Tony's probably thinking the same thing as me to some extent. We're listening to these stories, and I'm thinking, I watched a documentary recently about, I think it was Fleetwood Mac. It was either them or Zeppelin. They've all got individual private planes and whatever, and they're being chauffeur driven, and limos and whatever, and posh hotels.
Yeah.
Wow. That's not real.
I think also they've just all sold their publishing rights, haven't they? They've all done deals. Mick Fleetwood was the last one, I think, where.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think they sold it to he sold it to BMG. But there's been a few people doing that as well, just selling off the publishing for quite a few millions as well.
That seems like such a crazy move, but maybe there's something going on that I don't know about. But
I guess I guess he's approaching. I don't know. He might even be 80. So he might be thinking, well,
retirement money.
I'll have the cash and
for the
whatever.
kids.
Yeah, forget about it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Last chance to make a buck as well, I suppose, and quite a big
Could
buck
be.
in that case. Here's one for you then. So when you were touring out and about, I know you toured all over the place. What was you think? Maybe maybe you were on a stage somewhere, or you were looking at a sunset in some place, and what was the kind of the high point? You thought, oh man, I'm so lucky to be doing this. And what was the low point?
It's a tricky one, man. Like, we didn't really have any moments I personally didn't have many moments of sitting down and thinking, wow, look at this is it. Because we were doing everything ourselves. So the second we finished the gig, you got to get your stuff out of the way because the next band's got 10 minutes to get on. So you got that crazy thing. Then it's straight over to the merch desk. You're trying to do the merch and you're trying to, like do flyers and things. And then you got to drive, 4 hours towards Amsterdam for the next gig. You get up in the morning and, you're back at it again. So I did think, like, when we went out to Europe, we had to hustle so hard to get on that last European tour that we did with Snot. I thought it was the middle of summer. I thought when we get out there on the road and we're finally doing it and making it happen, there's gonna come a point where I'm gonna sit down with a cold beer. I'm gonna look at the sunset and think, we did it, man. We made it. But that moment just never came. But I mean, there was lots of partying, as there is when you're touring and stuff. Lots of getting hammered and lots of kind of excitable stupidity and stuff like that. But just the constant kind of momentum of the whole thing. Yeah, I didn't really have a moment to kind of reflect and soak it in, really. But like low points, there was tons of them. I could talk about them all day.
You remember one?
If I could sort of put a different spin on what I just said, because I don't want to sort of like be like really like negative and depressing about it, because the high point, I guess, would always be the show. Getting that, going through everything we would go through in a day to make it to a venue to play for like 40 minutes. That was the high point. That was what the whole day was about, was getting on stage. When you're up there, doesn't matter if there's 10 people or 10,000, for that moment that we were up there, we were living our dream and we were rock stars. We didn't care. It was our gang, our songs, loud and proud, doing our thing. So that was always the high point. And that's what we did it for, But low points, like I think like the last European tour we did had probably the most low points. I don't know how much you've read, but like our drummer's father got
I read some of that.
Yeah, on the very first gig, we managed to make it to Spain, all the way to Gijon. Got a ferry and sleeping in the van and all that thing. Made it to Spain. unloaded all of our gear into the first venue, met the headline bands and all the crew, and it was like, wow, it's a big venue. We're like, oh, this is amazing. We're finally on tour. And then I got the phone call to say, is Glyn with you? Can't get him on the phone. He's gonna have to come home now. His dad's had a stroke. We were like, what? So we had to pack all the gear away, just head straight to the nearest airport, and then within the hour, our drummer was gone, and me and Matt, the bass player, were just stuck in Spain for like a week, not knowing what to do, sleeping in a car park, basically. So that was pretty distressing, for everybody involved. And it kind of got worse from there, really, because Glyn amazingly did decide to come back out, which is like just heroic to do that. And we managed to finish the rest of the tour, but then a couple of days later we realized that our manager hadn't paid any of the tour support money to the headline band, so they were short of about $6,000 that they'd promised to pay a hire company for their tour bus. So we were the bad guys because they hadn't had our money, basically, but we'd paid it months ago to our manager, and he pocketed it and turned his phone off. We're in Italy, trying to recover a tour that was already like, taking a bit of a hammering, with the personal things going on. And now all the other bands on the tour hated our guts and wouldn't talk to us and thought that we were trying to, scam them out of money. And it just put a whole bad taste in all of our mouths, So even though we were playing on a beach and an open top stage in the peak of summer in Italy, doing awesome stuff, it kind of just, everything was kind of soured by that. And that's kind of my experience of everything that's happened to me in the music industry. Playing the gigs was awesome. The camaraderie was awesome. The fans were awesome. The adventures and the road trips were awesome. But everything was always overshadowed by the involvement of anything related to the music industry, whether it was managers, agents, labels, promoters. There was always something going on which kind of just took the shine off it,
Yeah, and as I say, I've only skim read it. I picked up quite a bit from it, but I don't think you necessarily. I don't think you do. I think you're quite constructive. You kind of constructively criticize the music industry and how it kind of operates. But is there anything briefly you would do differently looking back?
I think I just would have been more independent, straight from the off. Like if I could give any advice to anybody, certainly, nowadays it would be just do everything yourself, as much as you can yourself for as long as you can. Because if I focused more in the early days on doing our own promotion, just doing gigs, building relationships with fans, touring and doing all that stuff, I think we would have benefited way more than what I was doing, which was focusing on trying to get a record deal. So much wasted effort and energy and so much disappointment and so much wasted time on something which I don't think would have benefited us anyway. I mean, we did have record deals and we did have managers and agents, and we got screwed by every single one of them. So, all the best stuff that we did and the best press that we got and the best gigs was all stuff that we did for ourselves. And that was like, in the days when the current model wasn't fully formed yet, So for guys these days who've got all the tools and, all the things, it's the knowledge, the awareness is there now that like you promote yourself on social media, you build your relationship with your fans, you can make your own records, do it for cheap, you live stream, you do all that stuff. They kind of know the rules and the tools are freely available. So I think, if I could have my time again, I would have just stuck to what I knew to be right and focused on what was important rather than getting distracted by all the other stuff, which is just,
Yeah, that's good advice. I've got a couple of things which came into my head while he was saying that. Tony knows what I like. I'll probably forget one of them, but I'll try and remember them. One is, I mentioned this the other day, for what it's worth on social media, but like people, I was chatting to a guy the other week. He's a really interesting guy. He said a band that he thought my band sounded like. I'd never even heard of the band, right? So I went off and heard the band, and I quite liked them. So guess what? I bought one of their albums, right? And just for you as a musician, and particularly these days, things like merch and buying stuff from bands, it makes a massive difference, doesn't it, James? If people just don't go down that, kind of streaming route and let's have it all for free. If they want a future for music, really, if you like a band, buy some of their stuff.
Yeah, completely. The onus is on us now. Like, we know the industry is a joke. We can't rely on that. So, the tools are there for artists to do everything themselves. But the kind of responsibility now is on the fans as well. Like, if you really love music and you want to support your favorite artist, you've got to appreciate, and hopefully my book can help shine a light on what goes on in the day-by-day lives of ordinary musicians, rather than the cliche rock and roll glamorous stuff, which happens to like less than 1% of us.
Yeah.
I think if music fans appreciate how much musicians have to go through just to get their music out there and get it made and to share it for free, you know they have a kind of responsibility to support that by turning up to the gigs, by buying the merchandise, by sharing the stuff online and spreading the word. It's a direct relationship between musician and artist and fan. Is a two-way relationship like any other. We're giving our hard hard-earned kind of art out there for free, and I'm fine with that, but we can't do that forever. There has to be some kind of reciprocation, and it's not all about the money. Like, and I've never really made much money. I've made enough to survive and lead a good life, but I haven't made millions or anything like that. But yet, even when I was making a loss, I still kept doing it because I love doing it. It's in my blood. It's in my heart. But there does come a point when you do have to question, like, can I physically do this anymore, or am I going to have to go and get a job, at Asda, because things change. You have mouths to feed and rent to pay and bills to pay and stuff like that. So I think people need to realize that it is a two-way thing. You have got to you can't just say that you love that band. You have actually got to buy the merch. You got to turn up at the gig, and not scab a freebie because you're friends with the bass player or whatever. You got to you got to understand that, like, these guys are working hard for not a lot of payback.
Okay. I mean, firstly, just to say one thing, I'm really enjoying talking to you. It's a fantastic conversation.
Brilliant.
It's just really, really interesting what you're saying. I'm sure Tony got a few thoughts and stuff as well. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's fascinating what you're saying, because it really echoes some of the feelings we have at Keep Cardiff Live. And talking. I mean, I'm in contact with loads of musicians and people involved in the industry. And I just love your positive attitude. So it's let's call it the new industry, because nobody is going to come knocking on your door handing you some money anymore. That's not going to happen. And even then, when you look at it, it was only a minuscule amount of people actually got those really good deals. So in a way, it's a weird thing to say, but clearing out that really bizarre business, really, that just the 1% or whatever got the contracts and everybody else didn't or fell by the wayside. No, it's a much more even playing field, but it's not much money in it. I can understand that. But what I love as well is your positivity, and also I hate using the word entrepreneur because I think that's wrong, but sort of multi-dimensional. And what we try to do at Keep Cardiff Live, and what I'm trying to say, is kind of like a re-educating, I suppose, is it's what you've just said is absolutely perfect. If somebody watches this interview and listens to what you're saying, this is what you should be doing as a musician, as far as I'm concerned. You've got to do it yourself. It's all about the do-it-yourself industry now. But we also have to educate people. It's not for free, And I think once we get over that streaming business as well, we all use streaming. Let's not, let's all put our hands up and say, okay, you're a liar if you haven't used streaming and listened to stuff. But I think what you should be doing is listen to something and think, I really love this. I'm going to buy this album, or I'm going to buy a T-shirt or whatever. That's all we're asking, really. And for the price of a cup of coffee, make a donation to somebody or something like that. So that's why we're trying to go out, get over. We have to stand together as a community, fans and artists, to get this thing going, particularly with all that we've been through. And what you've said today is just perfect. I'm loving it. It's great.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's absolutely, I totally agree with Tony. It's exactly what the whole ethos of Keep Cardiff Live is. We live in Cardiff, so we're from Cardiff, so we kind of love Cardiff, but music transcends that, and the music kind of cultural kind of impact of music and keeping it going is if there was no live music anymore ever, wow, that would be a massive loss, and people wouldn't realize it until it was gone. And if we don't support it and make it financially viable, then how can musicians keep on giving you stuff for free? You know, you don't go down, you know, Greg's and say, can I have 10 free passes, or can you, you know, bung me a pie while they're at a cup of tea, you know, I'll pay you in a few weeks.
Well, we have tried it, Steve, but it didn't
I've
work.
tried it. It doesn't work. You know, I started off with a custard pie, but it just we weren't having it. James, when did you well, what encouraged you to do so, and when did you think, yeah, I've got to write a book about this?
Well, yeah, people ask me a lot. I've been doing a lot of interviews, obviously, specifically about the book, you know, the past couple of months, and that's one of the questions that, you know, a lot of always comes up. It's like, you know, why did you write the book? And, no, it's fine. But I need to apologize to you because I don't have an answer for that. It's such a strange one. I think the band broke up in December 2018, and I started writing the book in January 2019. So like 2 weeks after the band broke up. And I think looking back, I wrote the whole book in 2 months, start to finish. Just got up every day and just blasted it. So with no agenda for it ever getting published, you know, to see it on the shelves of Waterstones is insane, because I didn't write it. You know, if I ever thought it was going to get published and, you know, in the shops and stuff, I would have probably written a different book. You know, I would have toned down some of the bad language, and I probably wouldn't have been as brutally honest in it as I am, because I didn't really write it thinking that it was going to be a book, you know. So I think if I try and place my mind back to the time when I went in on that first day and started writing it, I think it was because, like, the band that I'd been in for 15, 20 years had broken up, and they're not very good terms. You know, I lost 2 of my best mates in the process. And I think I was just kind of in a very reflective place. You know, I was having a bit of an existential crisis, like looking at the rest of my life now, thinking, well, if I'm not that guy, then what am I? You know, this is all I know. This is what I've been doing since I was like 9 years of age. You know, I've given up all my kind of adult life thus far for this cause, and now it's gone. So, you know, does that mean everything I've done is of no value? You know, what does any of this mean? So I think for me, it was kind of a way of figuring out some of my own thoughts and going back over the good times and what have I learned. And I don't really know. I've never had any ambitions to write. It's not something that's ever been an interest of mine. I'm a big reader, but that's as far as it goes. So I think it was probably that, I guess.
Okay, well, that's a good answer. I mean, you're very eloquent, and you know, you communicate really well. And I think it comes across in your writing. It's kind of, when you say read so quickly, I'm almost seeing this like stream of consciousness, really, to some extent. I suppose it kind of was. Noise Damage, My Life as a Rock and Roll Underdog is also available from all the usual suspects, Amazon, etc. So, but if you Google Noise Damage, James Kennedy, I'm sure you'll get to it. So one of the things you talk about a little bit in the book as well is you talk about, you know, kind of mental health issues and CBT and this kind of thing. And you're quite open about it, you know. And when you said then, if you've been writing it for an audience, you'd have written it differently. I'm glad you didn't do that, because that's kind of what that book's about. It's from the heart. It's you know, it's not contrived at all. And I think, yeah, chuck a few swear words in there, because you use swear words, there they are. But do you want to maybe talk a little bit about that, or, you know, the kind of CBT, etc., as a kind of process and that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I loved it. I sort of did CBT for personal reasons, because, you know, as well as being a musician, you know, I'm a human with, you know, a whole array of you know, kind of issues and demons and, you know, stupidity and stuff like that. And I was kind of like wrecking a lot of the stuff in my personal life through, you know, kind of you know, just like that kind of working class chip on your shoulder, you know, that everyone's out to get you, and, you know, everything loaded against you and stuff like that. Yeah. So you know, I kind of had that, you know, mentality that was, you know, causing a lot of problems in my personal life, you know, trust issues and things like that. So I did CBT originally for that, and it was amazing. I've never been one to kind of like, you know, reach out for help, and at that point I was never one to admit that I needed help, or that I even had any flaws or problems, you know. I was always kind of like, you know, a man's man and all that sort of nonsense. So CBT was amazing, because I learned so much about how, you know, how our thoughts kind of determine our behavior, and how our behavior then determines how people treat us, which confirms our thoughts, and breaking those kind of cycles and stuff, you know, was really interesting. And it really did make a massive difference in the personal problems I was causing. It wasn't the answer to everything, because then, you know, like another 10 years later, I had a massive kind of, you know, meltdown, and CBT couldn't save me from that. But it certainly gave me some of the tools to help me navigate through it a lot better than I think I would have, if I didn't have those tools.
I think it's kind of I think attitudes towards mental health are slowly improving. By the way, because it was kind of it was not it was kind of thing which was kind of demeaned at some for I think a long time in society. I think in America they're ahead of us because, like, I know it's a bit it's not quite right, but they say just about every American has a therapist. There's that thing. Therapy is a good thing. It's just a good thing for a human being to get you back on track.
Completely. I was one of those guys. I was like, I don't need a therapist. That's for douchebags. I'm tougher than I can figure my own problems out. But as you get older, life throws you different curveballs. And you realize you're not prepared for all of it, and you are making things worse for yourself. And the common denominator in a lot of your problems is you. It's
yes.
I think anyone that's got enough courage to admit that they've got problems and they need help, I don't think I used to see it as a weakness, like more fool them. I don't need that stuff. But now I see it as immense amount of strength and courage to do that. It's easy to put a brave face on and talk big. It takes a stronger person to admit that they're vulnerable.
See, a few years ago, I don't know what Tony's thinking about this, but a few years ago, to hear you say that is so refreshing. Probably, I mean, a few years, maybe a decade or two back, people wouldn't have said what you just said. They wouldn't be talking about this.
Yeah.
It would be completely under wraps, Tom, wouldn't it? This kind of thing.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. It's like we touched on with the hearing thing earlier on. I know that's like a specific thing, but I mean, mental health issues affects everybody. There's no point in denying it. Everybody has some sort of stress in their life or something going on. Some period of their life, they're either going to have a relationship breakdown, they're going to have stresses, they're going to lose somebody close to them. So all those things take its toll, and it's such a hard life anyway in terms of making a living and getting by with for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So again, it's strange how in terms of education, it's shied away from. It's not on any curriculum in schools or anything like that. It's not even touched on. They'll teach you how to physically be fit, but they never teach you how to mentally be fit.
Yeah.
And I'm not on about brainwashing people with things, but just things that can help you cope. Mindfulness things, perhaps.
Yeah.
So again, the more we talk about these things, the more people are aware of them.
Particularly as three blokes, may I say?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I think it's important for men to do it. Like I try to be open about it in my songs as well. Like on my last album my last album, Make Anger Great Again, but the one before that was called Home, and that was a journal all about my kind of like breakdown that I had, basically. And there were songs on there like Just a Man and Home and Unconditional and Entertainer. And I was just being brutally honest about it, because I think it's healthy to do that. Like I was a victim of, like, when I was younger, and I styled myself very much on the alpha male type of guy, and those were the guys I looked up to, and they weren't really of much use to me when I was struggling. I had nobody that was saying the things that made me feel better or could help me through that problem. And I it caught me by surprise. I'd never thought I was going to be the sort of person that would need those, to navigate those challenges. And as you say, life changes, man. You get older, things happen, they're out of your control. You don't know, how things are going to pan out and what you're going to have to deal with in 10 years' time. So when I did that album, I thought, I'm just going to say it. I'm a bloke, you know what I mean? And if I can come out and be very brutally honest about, hey, I'm scared, or I don't think I got control of this, and I don't know what the answer is, and I'm worried, and that album just like was the most successful album I've ever done. Went straight into the top 50, and with no promotion at all, because again, I just did it as a side project from the band. And I got so many letters from people and emails from people. People had the lyrics tattooed on their hearts and stuff like that, because it was real, and they're things they're universal themes that everybody feels, even if they don't admit it. And I think not admitting it is such a shame, because when you admit it, you can surmount these things, and a little bit of help, a bit of CBT. There's no shame in that. It's not some pretentious California thing. It's it's real stuff.
Well, like I
So,
say, you would go
what's
for
up?
a jog every day when you feel for your physical health,
Mm.
you know. So why can't we talk about doing CBT or other things, you know? So you're
Totally.
spot on with it, really.
Or finding a few minutes in the day just to, you know, kind of clear your mind and do some of that more kind of Eastern stuff, you know. Nothing wrong
Totally.
with
Yeah.
that either, you know.
Yeah.
Dark room and
I'm
whatever.
one of those guys now. Like, I don't drink alcohol. I don't even drink caffeine anymore. Yeah, I never thought I was going to be one of those guys, but like little by little, every step of the way, I've realized that, right, okay, I can't have that in my life anymore. That's not good for me, you know. And yeah, I don't even have caffeine anymore, so I'm completely on rock and roll now. You know, it's amazing how, you know, what life throws at you. You know.
Yeah. Well, look at Alice Cooper, you know, look at Alice Cooper's journey as an example of stepping away from stuff.
Oh yeah.
I'm listening to you speak, James. I'm wondering, and I'm almost kind of visualizing it as well right in front of me, but I imagine that expressing yourself about that, you know, by kind of mental health issues and also music, I suppose, both in their own way, they're both kind of cathartic releases for you, are they?
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, I've always been authenticity has always been important to me with music. Like my back catalog is so varied. Like my first solo album was instrumental, experimental electronica, and then my second solo album was all like simple folk acoustic songs. You know, so I've always just tried to be authentic with my music, like what I'm interested in, what's getting me off musically, what I'm excited about doing, regardless of whether there's a lineage to whether it sounds like my last record. That's never been an issue for me. Like if what's getting me off more is getting into this thing or that thing, that's what I pursue, because then it's real. It's coming from a place of genuine musical inspiration and excitement and exploration, rather than trying to make something fit a box. So authenticity has always been important for me, and lyrically as well. Like the first 3 records that I did, coming back to that kind of alpha male thing, they were all about issues and political stuff, but it wasn't anything about the personal. There was no personal stuff in it because I didn't feel like I had any problems. You know, I knew what the problems in the world were, and I tried to be as open and as authentic about that as I could. But I kind of carried that ethos through then when I started having, you know, personal challenges in my later life. You know, I just wrote as openly and as honestly about that as I did with the earliest issues, you know.
I applaud you for doing that, because I think that's quite
Absolutely.
a brave thing to do. I want to ask you quite an inane question actually now, but it's not really. But you said about the lyrics, and I know, you know, we said earlier, I was amazed by your fan base. You know, you people go all over the place to follow you. Do you get people coming up to you at gigs who, I won't use the word obsessive, but who really read into your lyrics and kind of feed them back to you? And do you have that kind of moment where say how it meant stuff to them? Do you get that nice thing if
Yeah,
that happens?
yeah. Like I've had like some of the songs off that album Home played at, you know, people have messaged me to say they played it at their dad's funeral and stuff like that. You know, really touching stuff, you know, and like I say, people have had the lyrics put on them, and people have come up to me to tell me that, you know, they had issues with like depression and self-harm and things like that, and how, you know, when they heard the lyrics to that song, it really made them feel like, you know, you know, it wasn't just them, you know, there was nothing specific, like exclusively wrong with them.
Yeah.
And that stuff is like, you know, that's the reward, isn't it? You know, I'd never made any money on that record, but, you know, that's the reward, to know that, you know, I had an outlet for something that was personal and mean and real to me, and and I got to sort of deal with my own internal situation through that process, and then it also resonated with other people and help them as well. You know, that's the reward. You know, that's better than $1 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's lovely. That's special, isn't it, really?
Mm.
So I want to lead you into a slightly different territory. So only a few more questions, by the way, but it's just great chatting to you, to be honest. Make anger great again. I mean, that's not a title which doesn't mean anything. Tell us about that and your kind of political kind of activism, because you're fairly kind of prolific and overt, aren't you, about what you kind of stand for?
Yeah, well, like the last solo albums I've done, this is my 4th solo album. So I did 3 albums with Kaishira, and for every Kaishira album, there was always a solo album that kind of came out the same year. So I rattled them out for a few years. And but my solo projects were always where I got to explore the stuff that didn't really fit within the band, you know, like experimental electronica and acoustic music and stuff. So when I did that album Home, it was on the side. It wasn't really meant to be, you know, a commercial album. I just did it as a side project, because the band was still together at that point, but we were not speaking to each other and all that sort of stuff. So the end was kind of in process at that point. So rock and roll has always been where my heart is, though. So after the band officially disbanded after my last solo album, and it was in order to keep moving forward and making records, it was going to be exclusively under the moniker of a solo artist. I didn't have Kai Shearer anymore. I was now James Kennedy, the solo artist. It was kind of important for me to like put a stamp down. Okay, like musically, who am I really? And rock and roll that's where I came from. That's in my blood. The other stuff was musically interesting to me, little digressions, but if I had to put my flag down anywhere, it would be in rock and roll. So, and I was kind of itching after a few years of not knowing what was going on with Kai Shearer and doing more singer-songwriter music on the side. I was kind of itching to get back to loud, sweaty, angry, sweary, fuzz guitar rock and roll. So yeah, when the decision was made on the band, I was like, right, I want to make a record. I got stuff I want to say, and I want to dust my electric guitar off and make a rock and roll record. And like having sort of like covered so much ground with the personal stuff as well, I was starting to take much more interest again in the external stuff. The stuff that was going on, like Brexit and Trump and Boris and Corbyn, and all this stuff was really getting under my skin. So all those things kind of came together and made Make Anger Great Again.
I love the title because it's obviously a Mickey take of a certain American gentleman with blonde hair, yeah. Which we won't get into on that one because that could run for hours. But in general, I mean, because you got quite involved with kind of obviously predominantly kind of left wing kind of activity. I mean, you took part in I think kind of politically orientated music events and all kinds of stuff, didn't you?
Yeah, I've done a bit, not as much as I should really for a guy who's like, out of my 7 albums, 4 of them are like really political. So I kind of don't walk it as much as I talk it really, but I feel like there's other people doing that better than me. There's people who that's their passion. Like my passion is music, like, and I'm given a choice with what I'm going to do with my day. I'm going to do that. It's out of my control, So and other people feel like that about their political activity, their activism. So I'm not going to sort of like insult anyone by making out that I'm some kind of, man of the people and all that sort of stuff, because I'm a musician and that's what I'm going to spend my time doing. But I am interested in this stuff and I do have my opinions the same as everybody else. And I like to write about it in my songs. And now and again, I do get involved with stuff as and when I can. But I mean, I'm not sort of as involved as the people that spend, all day, every day actually out there with their sleeves rolled up, getting the job done,
Yeah. Do you still get angry at stuff when in the news and social media and stuff? And if we do you largely keep that to yourself, sort of thing, or not?
Anger is my sort of default reaction to things.
Yeah. Well, it is great, as you say.
I tend to flip to anger, and then I'm like, okay, calm down. Like my girlfriend's always saying to me, come on, it's a small thing, just relax. And then in 10 minutes, the steam's gone and I'm okay again. So that tends to be my default reaction to stuff. And I am very active on social media, so I do get a lot of, I do see a lot of stupid comments and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of I've got to a stage now where I don't. There's no middle. There's no filter. They're just gone. They're just unfriended, gone. Because one thing I did was I deliberately and consciously built up. As Tony knows, I've got 5,000 Facebook friends. I know about 40 of them.
Yeah.
But then they're nearly all musicians or have a love of music. And I don't want to live my own personal echo chamber. But particularly. No offense to Americans. I know some really lovely Americans and they're great, thoughtful Americans, but the ones who indulge in stuff we've seen going on over the last few weeks, I don't want them within, they're gone, they're just gone. So, and then I found out about the political stance through the fact that I'd add them as musicians. And then I see, where they kind of stand. Tony's got a kind of an interesting approach to kind of politics and social media, I think, in terms of, your attitude is more kind of pragmatic, I think, Tony, that you can't really do much about it. So why kind of say something daft on social media and live to regret it? Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I'm not so active in social media. Obviously, I have to do a lot of social media with Keep Cardiff Live, But yeah, I suppose pragmatic would be the word about it. It is, I really would like there to be change, and you could probably guess my politics as well, similar to yours. So personally, that's my politics, but I don't really put it out there much on social media, because I think the other problem is as well is that when you do things like that, you just tend to attract the wrong sort of people and making comments. And the one thing I hate more than that is negativity, because we can do without that. It's hard enough anyway without having any negativity. So that's kind of, I keep my views myself. My friends know my views, really. Obviously, I'm talking about it now on a video, but my friends know my views, but I don't really push them out there. But on the other hand, I don't want to I don't want to promote any of the wrong views, but I just really sort of keep an eye on what's going on and just filter all that information in myself, But I'm not really the sort of person who does a lot of it on social media. Perhaps I should do more. I don't know. Perhaps I can change the world. I don't know. Perhaps I'm barking up the wrong tree.
Untapped potential, Tony.
Yeah, yeah. Perhaps I should stand for power. Oh, it's all going to my head now, but yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's a really difficult thing. I mean, I've got very close friends who I love. They're really good people, but I can't talk about politics and stuff with them. So I think it's that thing as well. It's like sometimes we just agree not to discuss it. And I think if you amplify that onto social media, you're talking to people who sometimes you don't really know that well.
Yeah,
And
totally,
that's where things can really get out of hand and not be understood.
yeah. Exactly the same. Yeah. I mean, like, I've got like, thousands of friends on Facebook as well. And like exactly the same as Steve said, it's like every time you do a gig, you get 5 guys and their girlfriends add you because they're in the other bands and they want to discuss, gear share or whatever. So over the years, I've just amassed all these people that I may have met once, who I don't really know, but had reason to sort of talk to them or whatever on that one night. And yeah, like sometimes you're scrolling through your news feed and you see all this stuff and you're like, who is this guy? Why is he on my newsfeed? And you think, oh yeah, that's the guy I met in 2007, in a gig in Newport. And it's difficult, man, because yeah, I keep forgetting that it's like, especially on Twitter, that it's public, it's open. Like I'm always running. I got quite a lot of followers on Twitter. That's like my biggest one, and I'm always like running my mouth off on there about stuff. And I'm just venting. I forget that it gets seen by people. Like I said something about Johnny Rotten the other day, and it was quoted in a magazine. And I've said something about Piers Morgan that was quoted in the Mirror. Morrissey, I said something about Morrissey that was quoted in some newspaper as well, which he responded to. It's like, and I always forget every time I get incensed or angry about something. I think, oh, I'm gonna, I'll tell him, I'll send a tweet, that'll sort it. And I forget that it's out there and it's public,
Well, Donald Trump was that was his thing, wasn't it? That didn't always go so well. Either did it?
No. Well, funnily enough, like with the first video of Make Anger Great Again was a song called The Power, and it was written before the pandemic. So and all the Black Lives Matter protests and all that sort of stuff. It was written before that. But when we put the video together during the pandemic, we used footage from a lot of that stuff that was happening to make a video, because we couldn't do a rock and roll video because we were in a pandemic. So I had to use kind of borrowed footage, And on the first day that we put it up, YouTube took it down, saying that it was not fit for the platform because it had shocking content in there. So they didn't like the Colston Hall statue coming down and all that sort of stuff. So it was the first single, first day of the the big promo kickoff, and I didn't have a video I could promote. So what I was doing instead was we did an uncensored version and managed to get YouTube to put it back on condition that I wouldn't promote it within the platform. So it's up there, but I wasn't allowed to share the link or anything. So what I was doing was every time Donald Trump would tweet, I would embed the video into his comments, and I would say, "Make anger great again," with a kind of like fist in the air. And then so I'd have like thousands of Trump fans coming at me there, calling me all the names under the sun. And I actually got the video from like 0 views to like nearly 14,000 views, just exclusively off the fact of using Donald Trump's tweets. So now he's banned from there. I've got like, my game's over,
I like that. We'll step away from politics, I think, anyway, and talk a little bit about the label, Conic Records. What tell me a little bit about it, the kind of the ethos and strategy, and is it principally a platform for your stuff, or is it like a stable mentality? How does it work?
It started out originally just as a way for us to put Kaishira records out, just so we had, the infrastructure to do that. And then in about 2014, I think I turned it into a publishing company as well, a music publishing company, because I was getting lots of sync requests. None of them were really like relevant to my band. Nobody wanted like sweary political prog rock for their advert. So I felt like there was a lot of like opportunities that were being missed there. So I thought, well, why don't I kind of like actually set myself up as a company and share these opportunities with my friends? I've got friends who do like electro pop or acoustic music that would be perfect for these sync briefs that I was getting in. So I started kind of becoming a bit of a sync agent. And I tucked into it, as I do with everything. And before long, I kind of had a network of like partner publishing companies pretty much in every country around the world. And every day I was getting sent these like briefs and requests for advert music and stuff. So I went on a kind of spree. I was just signing people left, right, and center. I think at one point I had like 35 artists that I was representing within the publishing company for Sync. And that was a contributing factor then to my sort of like mental breakdown that I had kind of like a year later, because I was doing that. I was doing Kaishira. I was, doing my solo stuff. I was teaching during the daytime and playing covers in the pubs on the weekends. I was sort of like I was underweight, drinking too much, and burned out. So that was one of the things I then clawed back and just sort of focused on my own music for a bit. But yeah, I had great success with it. When it was going strong, I had great success. Like I got 40 grand for a girl in Brighton who I've still never met, for 30 seconds for an advert in America on telly for a hotel chain. And that was awesome. You know what I mean? So I would take a small percentage for doing that, but she didn't sign any of her rights to me. I was basically just an agent. It's like, hey, if I can make this happen, you get the lion's share, and then that's it. We're done. And that was the model. It was very flexible, no sort of obligation on my part and no expectation on theirs. And it was a model that really worked. And I think during the pandemic, I've been feeling a lot like I should rejuvenate that, and get some more artists, because people can't gig now. They can't earn money from their, a lot of their normal places. And I think Sync, is I think that's a great opportunity for a lot of artists that don't have any other revenue streams. It's different for me because I've always been quite diverse. I can produce records, I can play covers, I've got a book, I can teach. I've got a lot of strings to my bow that I've developed over my 40 years. So if I can sort of share the love a little bit with that, then I'm happy to. So I think I will get back on the saddle with the Sync stuff, but I've got to take it slow because I know my obsessive nature. I know what I'm like. I'll be going guns a blazing, and then I'll burn myself out again and call the whole thing off.
How do people get? How do people connect with you with Sync stuff? And what kind of stuff do people prepare? Like 30-second clips? Is that how it works, or generally?
No, I was just doing it for my friends. I thought, well, I'll try and get my friends' bands some stuff. Like, do you know the guys Henry's Funeral Show? You must know those guys.
Yeah.
Al is my best mate. We met in college and been best friends ever since. I managed to get them 1 or 2 placements on TV in America and stuff like that as well. So I was just primarily trying to just jobs for the boys, you know what I mean? And then I kind of expanded it then. Like every time I would discover an artist that I thought was cool, that had something that I didn't have on the roster, like, hip hop or electro pop or classical, I would kind of just reach out to them and say, hey, I've heard your stuff. I really like it. This is the deal. This is what, we do. If you want to be in the mix, great. If you don't, no probs. And that's kind of the way it went. Submissions have never really worked. I did have a submission email, and it was just so full of so much stuff that had nothing to do with anything. And even if you reply and say, "Oh, thanks, dude. I love your band, but there's not really any demand for death metal." In the advertising world, but keep it up. People would just keep sending you the stuff, So I kind of feel for labels and A&R guys because I'm just a cottage industry, with an email address, on my website. But I mean, if you're the head of A&R for Sony Records, I can just imagine and your email account is pointless. You know what I mean? Like the email account I had was pointless. I don't even look anymore. So yeah, it's mostly stuff I just discover and stumble across, really.
Okay. What's the future for James Kennedy?
I don't know, man. I'll continue doing what I'm doing and what I've always done. I've never really had a plan. I just follow my interest and my inspiration wherever my nose takes me. And like this time last year, I would have had no idea I'd be talking to you guys about having a memoir. So I don't know. I'll definitely keep making records. Hopefully next year, if not later this year, I can tour this album, because I would love to get back out there, make some filthy fuzz rock noise again. Now writing is something that's kind of under my belt. Perhaps that'll be something I continue with. I don't know, but I will continue doing what I do, whatever that is.
Okay, well, you've done all right so far, haven't you? So we've talked about loads. So just to say, obviously, Noise Damage, My Life as a Rock and Roll Underdog is available all over the place. So do check it out. As I say, I will read it properly, but I didn't do a bad job of skim reading it because there's a lot of pages. But it's great. I really like it. I said to Tony earlier as well, I think he'll really like it too. I don't know whether we're really your target audience, but we love music, so we're in, sort of thing.
I didn't have one.
Okay, good. Well, lovers of music is a good target audience, isn't it? And lovers of life and lovers of music. James, how do people find out more about you?
I'm all over social media, so it's James Kennedy UK on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. James Kennedy Stuff on YouTube. And jameskennedystuff.com as well. So if you type me in on Google, all my stuff comes up. But you got to be careful, because there's a James Kennedy in America who's a reality TV star, and if you type in James Kennedy, he tends to come up first. So type in James Kennedy singer, and then you'll get all my stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty easy. If you type in the magic word singer or UK, then I'm pretty easy to find after that.
And thank you so much, James. I mean, Tony isn't actually feeling that great today. He wasn't going to stick around, but he's obviously just enjoyed hearing you. So thanks a lot.
I'm so glad I have stuck around. It's been absolutely fascinating. I've really loved being involved in this interview. And I'd just like to say I've got 2 books the same as you on the bookshelf.
Great.
One about the Beatles and one about factfulness, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, really? Books,
But for now, James, thanks ever so much. That was great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's great to chat to you guys.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.